What's up, Sockeye Station Savvies? I'm Quacker's Co, and this is the fish fry for December 20th, being held at Sockeye Station. Our cookware for this rotation is the Aerospray MG, the Splatbrella, the H3 nozzle nose, and the Explosher. Oh boy, we have the Explosher at Sockeye Station again. And whenever we have the Explosher in a composition, we have to remember that its paintability and its fire rate are pretty low. But luckily we have the Aerospray and the Splatbrella, which can paint the turf and the walls pretty well here at the station. We also have the H3 in the composition, which will do a great job at causing extra damage to cohawks and bosses. That Explosher and the H3 also have some great range for reaching the shoreline from the tower. So make sure you try to keep yourself either there or at the basket, keeping an eye on what's spawning, especially if it's a fly fish. If you don't know, the Explosher shot has bomb properties. So if it can be taken out with a bomb, the Explosher can take it out in a cinch. That goes for everything except for moths. And it's very important at Sockeye Station to paint around the basket area, and if you extend out to the walls, make sure you start heading back before the wave starts. It's really easy to stun something on Sockeye Station's shoreline that needs to be lured to the basket for really easy eggs to collect. It doesn't hurt to get that tower all painted though. If we find ourselves pushing towards the shoreline, we always need a quick escape strategy to get ourselves out of there. So get whatever you can lured to the basket, splat it, and then keep that area clear. Try to keep that basket area painted all through the match. On a high tide, it'll still be helpful to keep that H3 and the Explosher there on the tower. The Aerospray can do a pretty good job on causing some damage even though it has that lower DPS. And as long as you're keeping up with opening up the Splatbrella to splat chum and small fry, it can have some really insane damage output. The only real bummer about Sockeye Station is its low tide. Considering how far away the salmonids are spawning from where the basket is, if your teammates aren't luring targets to the basket, it'll be really hard to collect those eggs. So if you approach any priority targets, always try to work the sides, and then quickly make your way back to the basket area. Keep that area painted, and try to keep as many bosses from getting too close to the basket. About halfway from the bridges to the basket is where you want stuff to be splat, except for moths and scrappers. Get them right to the basket and splat them there. If you ever push from the bridges straight to the shoreline, remember all those different ways that you can get away from those targets. Get in, take out those targets, and then use those corners and different jumps to get yourself back to the basket. On a glowfly's occurrence, we have a little bit of technique in order to make sure that we can clear it. The Aerospray's DPS is just low enough that it will need some support on that damage line. Open up the Splatbrella to splat those chum, and keep yourself from launching it. It would be most preferable if the H3 or the Explosher can cause some damage to that Goldie before it gets to the line. But you need to make sure that that Explosher's blast is landing at the feet of the Goldie. It will pierce right through it, and you won't get as much damage output as you want. On a Griller's occurrence, that Aerospray can do a really good job on small fry control. You just have to make sure that everyone else is hitting their shots. Opening the Splatbrella without sending it is also a fantastic trick for taking out those small fry. Luckily, the Explosher shot does not pierce through a Griller. Just make sure you're landing those hits just right, and hopefully they won't be too bad. During a Mudmouth occurrence is when the Explosher truly shines. If you can keep this thing constantly taking out Mudmouths, there won't be that much time for Lessers to spawn, and there will be so many golden eggs on the map, your teammates won't know what to do with them. On a Mothership occurrence, that H3 and Explosher can do a great job on taking out Chinooks while they're on their way down. They can also do some pretty good job on causing some damage to that Mothership on approach. If you have the Explosher there at the top of the tower, you can land some shots onto the top of the Mothership, and that'll splat Chinooks that are spawning and drop some eggs right there by the basket. On a Goldie Seek, we also have that same issue that we had with the Glowfly's Goldie. You need to make sure that that Explosher shot lands right at the foot of the Goldie. And one really nice trick is to keep pace with the Goldie while you keep the Splatbrella open. That way you have some constant DPS hitting that boss. During a giant tornado wave, that Explosher shot does pierce through enemies. So if you can position yourself at the front or the end of the egg chain, you can allow that shot to pass through as many enemies as possible, causing some massive damage. These next two rotations have some really powerful sloshers, and then when we get to Gone Fission, we'll have a wildcard rotation with the Grizzco slosher. So have some fun with these really powerful rotations that we have, and when that wildcard shows up, get ready for some massive damage output. Okay, let's get into the cookware. Our first cooking utensil is the Aerospray MG. The Aerospray MG has some really good coverage on walls and turf, and we gotta do extra work to make sure these areas stay as painted as we possibly can. The Aerospray also doesn't have that much range, so make sure if you're getting yourself right next to something, that you're aware of what's next to you and whether or not you're going to get hit. Every one of the weapons in this composition does a pretty good job on taking out fish sticks and stingers. But unless you have some height on the fish sticks, we'll have to climb up and take them out from above. You can use the arrow spray to push towards stingers, but the explosher can take it out so much quicker that it'd probably be better to ping this way and try to make sure that explosher player is covered whenever they get there. Try to play the arrow spray aggressively, but try not to do anything too dangerous. Our second cooking utensil is the Splatbrella. You can get some extra wall painting efficiency out of the Splatbrella if you do the trick where you position yourself, aiming slightly diagonally at the wall, letting your spread move across it. This same idea works for taking out fish sticks as well. Try to put as many enemies into your reticle as possible, that way you can cause more damage to each one of them. If you want to play the Splatbrella aggressively, you'll have to use the trick of opening up your Brella without sending it. This gives you some constant DPS damage, and is extremely useful on taking out large hordes of small fry and chum. Be careful about Quahawks getting too close to you, they can attack you through the shield. If you do some extra work just like the arrow spray, on keeping the area painted, you'll find it easier to get this weapon moved around, and to get to those locations where you can cause some extra support fire, or some extra damage towards a boss. Our third cooking utensil is the H3 Nozzle Nose. The H3 Nozzle Nose has some crazy damage output. You just have to make sure that all three of those shots are hitting. Its range is also incredibly good for Sockeye Station. Both you and the Explosher can do a great job on taking out big shots and taking out stingers. If you play the H3 too aggressively, you'll find yourself with enemy ink at your feet and you won't be able to move. So play this weapon as supportively as possible. It's always really good to use it to cause some extra damage at any point in the match. You have to be really careful about stunning things at the shoreline though. Stay focused on causing some damage and getting a little bit of extra wall painting in, and the H3 can be an incredible utensil for Salmon Run. Our last cooking utensil is the Explosher. The Explosher's blast does a great job at painting walls. The only problem is how much ink it uses and its fire rate. It'll help to get as much painting done at the beginning of the match, that way you can focus all of your shots on causing damage. And you need to remember that your shots pierce, so sometimes it's helpful to get down to the ground level, cause some massive damage to lessers, and then get yourself back up looking to see if a flyfish has spawned. You have to be really careful about playing the Explosher aggressively. The shot delay will cause things to get a little too close to you. You may not be able to get the ground painted at your feet before you're able to get out of there. You also need to be really careful about running yourself out of ink. Keep yourself topped off, because if you're providing support from on top of the tower, there's a good chance that a Moz will sneak up on you, and be ready for it. It's probably not too wise to throw eggs with the Explosher either. Run that egg all the way to the basket, and look around for any extra painting you can do before getting back to your post. A couple boss tips for splatting things with the Explosher. If you aim on the right side of the fish stick's rotation, that piercing shot will take out more salmonids with each shot. You can also fire above salmonids, having that shot land on top of it, splatting the salmonid without ever seeing the salmonid. Of course we can take out flyfishes really quick, but one of the harder enemies to take out is a steelhead. It takes 2 shots to take it out, so make sure your aim is on point. When you're dealing with a scrapper, you have a couple different options on causing damage. If you approach him from the side, you can fire through him, hurting some enemies on the other side of the scrapper. Or you can attack him from directly behind him, making that blast hit the inside of his car, causing that big splash damage to the scrapper. If you're all alone and you need to cover a flipper flopper spot, try to land a shot on the left and right side of the circle. It makes it just a little bit easier. Firing one shot directly in the center of a flipper flopper spot usually doesn't cover it immediately. During an extra wave, that arrow spray in the H3 can do a good job on causing some constant DPS damage to that Kohozuna, and the arrow spray and the Splatbrella can do a really good job on keeping that Kohozuna's attention and keeping him there in the center of the map. If you have the Explosher, try to keep some distance. Keep an eye out for where those flyfishes are spawning, and take them out really quick. And don't forget to cause some extra damage with every single weapon to that Kohozuna. It's really helpful. And it's still really helpful to look towards the beginning half of the match for a moment to activate your special. That way you can take out some bosses, cause some damage to the Kohozuna, and spawn some golden eggs early on in the wave. And the fish fry usually comes up for the stage rotation. So if you want to catch these updates when they're hot and fresh, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell. And if you want other fellow Grizco employees to receive these tips, make sure you like and share the video. Bye-bye. If you want to give the fish fry an algorithm boost, just comment what your favorite or least favorite weapon is of this composition. As hard as the weapon is to use, I think I'm going to have to give it to the Explosher. You can easily get over 70 eggs on a Mudmouth wave as long as you keep this weapon going. Alrighty, bye-bye.